I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day is stand-up comedy still funny? And the reason I'm asking that question is because it seems to me that more and more the comedy that we are being fed, the stand-up comedy that we're being fed, actually isn't so much about comedy anymore. Instead, it's about politics and ideology. I watched a recent Netflix comedy special, something that's come on Netflix in the last couple of weeks, and by about the 20-minute mark, this is just over an hour of comedy, by about the 20-minute mark, the comedian had started to get very serious, and then by the halfway point, and then for the final half of this comedy show, she actually began to get quite serious and angry and upset about things, and if she wasn't doing that, it had become a public therapy session. Now, I understand why she was angry about certain things, because she herself in her younger years had been the victim of a rape, had been the victim of serious physical assault, and so this is the sort of public therapy sort of element of what she does, and she's not telling jokes at all through the big chunk of the show, and then it quickly devolves into this whole basically very simplistic, very ideological, very political a lecture about the state of world affairs, particularly between men and women, and she targets men in particular, straight white men specifically. And I can understand why she's got that anger. She's a broken person who has experienced serious brokenness in her life, and if you were the victim of something by a certain type of person, it could be very easy for you to wrongly start believing that every person who shares the same characteristics as your abuser or the perpetrator of this crime against you is somehow responsible for the actions of the perpetrator who victimized you. Now, as I said, it's simplistic, it's a wrong way to look at the world, and in effect she's diagnosing the wrong problem, but the whole point is this is supposed to be a stand-up comedy show. And like, I'm thinking to myself, why is this happening? It's not just her. I watched Chris Rock's recent comedy special, and that comedy special, again, just evolved into this sort of, at times, this public therapy session. It started to go into places that just weren't comedy and were kind of just sort of like, what happened, Chris? You used to be a really quite a funny and talented comedian, but this doesn't really feel so much like comedy as it does. It feels like some sort of catharsis where you sort of, it's a public confession and a public session about politics and ideology and what you think about the world. And it seems to me that this is becoming more and more of the norm. I mean, look, maybe I'm just too narrow and sheltered in the amount of stand-up comedy that I'm watching, but certainly one of the primary vehicles now for stand-up comedy is Netflix. They make a lot of it now. It seems to be sort of one of their core staples that they're putting out there a lot more. And it's interesting, you can actually see consistently that the majority of these comedians, they just go to the political stuff, they just go to the ideological stuff, and it's not really so much a joke as it is, hey, you know what we need? More gun control. Ba-dum-bum, shh. Hey, you know what? Straight white males. Ba-dum-bum, shh. Hey, you know what? How about Donald Trump? Ba-dum-bum, shh. Hey, you know what? How about the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't get elected? That's sexism. Ba-dum-bum, shh. And it's like, here's my political view or my ideological view. Oh, and I'll stick a little bit of a joke or an attempted joke on the end of it. And so, trust me, it's still comedy. It's like, what is this? Like, are Netflix only selecting certain types of comedians to tell jokes? Is the comedy world being corrupted so much by politics and ideology that that's sort of the primary focus now? Like I said, this comedy special I watched the other night, it spent the final half hour was like a serious TED talk. And it was like, what is this? Are we going to get to the point where stand-up comedy is a comedian who comes out, tells a couple of jokes at the beginning, and then proceeds to give us a sermon on politics and ideology? Like, what's going on here? It was so refreshing to me recently to watch the Jerry Seinfeld Netflix special because he actually just told jokes. It was just funny. He just did comedy without the need to sort of lecture or hector us about what we're supposed to think about the world. And as I said, whether or not this is the state of stand-up comedy in general, or whether this is just the fact that in organisations who have the power to sort of greenlight and fund these sort of comedy specials and broadcast them, they're only greenlighting things along particular political lines. So you either don't say anything about politics at all and you're a big super name like, say, Jerry Seinfeld, and you can sort of get away with it, or you are actually someone who sort of toes the political line, and then we greenlight your special. But the whole thing is, it seems to me that less and less of it is actually that funny. It's like I watched, there's a stand-up comedy show that's on Netflix at the moment where they sort of have a series of comedians and they get like 20 minutes each. And it seems to me you can start to pick the trend. I'll actually skip through episodes and not watch certain comedians because I can tell by the description whether or not it's going to be funny or not, or whether it's just going to be a whole lot of ideology with attempted humour. And this is the thing on top of that, a lot of it's just not funny. And if we're not doing political ideology or politics, we're doing jokes about genitals. And it's like, where's the comedy? Where is the clever comedy? There are certain comedians who can do this well, and they are the comedians who tend to be people who have some sort of academic background or who have some sort of intelligence and have read widely, and they bring that into their comedy in such a way that even if you disagree with them, you say, yeah, that was really clever. That was very clever because it's sharp and it's intelligent and there's a real wit to it. But a lot of this is not that. It's just very lowbrow. It's like talking head after talking head after talking head who is here to tell you about what you should think about politics. And here's the thing. The majority of comedians, the vast majority of comedians, they are not qualified to give us moral philosophy. They are not qualified to give us political philosophy because they don't actually know much more than the average Joe about these issues. They're not well studied in the area of moral philosophy. They're not well studied in the area of political philosophy. It just becomes a whole lot of truisms, popular truisms that you hear flying around society and sort of cliched quotes and, that's so funny, isn't it? Like an issue like gun control. It's like a comedian's never going to be able to delve into that in any serious way. They're just going to appeal to one particular political view on that. There's not going to really be much nuance or intelligence in that. So I just don't get it. Where is stand-up comedy heading? Like I said, are we going to get to the point where stand-up comedians are just going to introduce themselves, tell a couple of quick jokes about why did the chicken cross the road, and then proceed to give us an hour of political lecturing? It's sort of starting to look more and more like indoctrination than comedy to me. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.